By 1944, Europe had become a graveyard of machines. German, American, and Soviet vehicles lay abandoned on roadsides, fields, and forests, silent witnesses of the largest mechanized war in human history. Among the wreckage, U.S. soldiers often stumbled upon strange, unfamiliar machines, some small, some massive, all built with the unmistakable precision of German engineering. One such machine stood out, a giant half-track with broad steel tracks and a powerful nose. The markings read Sd.Kfz 7, short for Sonderkraftwagen 7, meaning Special Purpose Vehicle Number 7. To the G it looked like something out of a science fiction movie, huge, strong, and intimidating. So naturally, they had to try it. What they didn't know was that this vehicle would reveal one of Germany's greatest hidden weaknesses, its crippling thirst for fuel. The Sd.Kfz 7 was no ordinary truck. It was one of the most important support vehicles in the German army, capable of towing the infamous 88mm flak gun, the weapon Allied pilots feared the most. Built by Krauss-Maffei, the Sd.Kfz 7 weighed nearly 8.5 tons empty. It had a Maybach six-cylinder engine, producing about 140 horsepower. Not a lot by modern standards, but plenty for its time. This half-track could carry 12 men, their equipment, and tow heavy artillery. It had four-wheel steering, a track suspension, and a solid chassis designed for cross-country mobility. For German artillery crews, it was a symbol of reliability, the backbone of mobility. But for the American G's who found one sitting intact near a captured airfield, it was a curious mystery. When U.S. troops captured German positions, they didn't just look for intelligence, they experimented. One soldier later recalled, "We used to test anything the Germans left behind: trucks, tanks, even motorcycles. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it blew up. This particular Sd.Kfz 7 seemed fine. The fuel tank wasn't empty, and the engine still had oil. With a few adjustments, they got it running." The sound was deep and throaty, the kind of mechanical growl that screamed power. Everyone was impressed. Until they checked the fuel. Within just a few hours of driving, the G's noticed the fuel gauge plummeting. They hadn't gone far, maybe 20 miles, yet the tank was nearly dry. At first, they thought the gauge was broken. But after refueling with jerrycans and driving again, they saw the same result. The Sd.Kfz 7 consumed more than 85 gallons of fuel just to cover 100 miles, nearly double what an American M3 half-track needed. And that difference told a much bigger story, the story of how German engineering brilliance collided with logistical reality. Let's compare the two. The Sd.Kfz 7 was a masterpiece, complex, rugged, and precise. It could handle mud, snow, and sand. Its towing power was unmatched. The M3 half-track, built by the Americans, was simpler, less armor, fewer moving parts, and a smaller engine. But it could be built fast. Tens of thousands rolled off U.S. assembly lines. The M3 could run for hours on a single tank, and when it broke down, it could be fixed by almost any field mechanic. The German vehicle, on the other hand, needed specialized tools, spare parts, and most importantly, massive amounts of gasoline. During World War II, fuel was the most precious resource after men and ammunition. Every army needed it, but only one had it in abundance: the Allies. Germany, cut off from global oil supplies, relied on synthetic fuel plants and the Romanian oil fields in Ploiesti. When those were bombed by the Allies, the entire German war machine began to starve. Vehicles like the Sd.Kfz 7, powerful but fuel-hungry, became liabilities. The irony was clear: the more powerful your army, the faster it bled fuel. American mechanics who inspected captured Sd.Kfz 7 South noticed how refined the engineering was. The Germans built with precision every bolt, every lever designed for performance. But that precision came at a cost. Where an M3 could be repaired with a wrench and a hammer, the Sd.Kfz-7 needed spare parts that weren't standardized, sometimes different from one factory batch to another. It was engineering brilliance that didn't scale. By 1944, the German Army's fuel crisis had reached desperate levels. Units were rationed to a fraction of what they needed. Tank crews often towed their own vehicles with horses when fuel ran out. Luftwaffe aircraft sat idle on airfields. And the once proud Sd.Kfz-7 fleets were abandoned in ditches, out of gas. Some German memoirs mention entire artillery battalions immobilized because the tractors had no fuel. That's why American troops found so many Sd.Kfz-7 South intact, not destroyed in battle, just left behind, useless without gasoline. The Gs couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. Many said the ride was smoother than the M3, and the tracks gripped the mud like nothing else. But after running it for a few hours, they realized why the Germans couldn't sustain these machines. As one GI reportedly joked, if we had to feed this thing, we'd need our own oil field. The American approach to war was about numbers and logistics. Instead of building the most advanced machine, they built the most practical one. The M3 half-track could be built by car factories using existing tools. Its parts were interchangeable. It could run on lower-grade fuel, and it could be shipped anywhere in the world. That philosophy, simplicity, standardization, and supply helped the Allies outlast the Axis powers. Still, the Sd.Kfz-7 deserves respect. It was an engineering marvel. Its suspension system gave it excellent off-road performance. Its towing ability was unmatched. It could pull the 88mm gun at full speed through terrain that would bog down wheeled trucks. It had a winch system for self-recovery, and the troop compartment could even carry ammunition. For the early Blitzkrieg years, it was the perfect companion to fast-moving German armies. But as the war dragged on, its appetite for fuel became its curse. A Tiger tank burned over 3 gallons per mile. A Panther wasn't far behind. Now add the fuel needs of every truck, every tractor, every motorcycle. The Wehrmacht had thousands of vehicles, all thirsty for gasoline, and Germany simply couldn't produce enough. The Sd.Kfz-7, once a symbol of strength, became another drain on a collapsing supply chain. When American and British engineers studied captured German vehicles after the war, they learned a valuable lesson. Over-engineering can be a weakness. You can have the best design in the world, but if it's hard to maintain, hard to fuel, and hard to build, it will lose to something simpler and more sustainable. That principle shaped post-war military design for decades. After 1945, surviving Sd.Kfz-7 South were used briefly by other armies. Even the British and Americans kept a few for testing. Some were handed over to Poland and Czechoslovakia. A handful survived in museums and private collections today, meticulously restored by enthusiasts who admire their mechanical artistry. They stand as relics of a time when technology raced ahead of practicality. When those Gs drove a captured Sd.Kfz-7 for the first time, they were thrilled by its power. But as the fuel gauge sank, they understood why so many German machines lay silent on the battlefield. It wasn't lack of bravery. It wasn't poor design. It was the simple reality that wars are won by those who can keep their engines running. The Sd.Kfz-7 was a triumph of engineering and a tragedy of logistics. In the end, the GI's little experiment revealed a great truth about World War II. Power is impressive, but endurance wins wars. And in that contest, the Sd.Kfz-7 burned itself into history 1 gallon at a time. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this piece of history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.